Good afternoon. It is Wednesday, May 20th, 2026. And today I am going to teach you how to take down the system. So that says Massachusetts Practice Series regarding 93A. You see the third line, Chapter 93A. So what is Chapter 93A? That is the Consumer Protection Act. Okay? Now, first off, I am not an attorney and this is not legal advice. This is for entertainment purposes only, so that our boys at the NSA and CIA and Instagram and Google and Facebook and LinkedIn and even Twitter all don't censor this. But the odds are pretty high that they will anyway. I have learned my lessons over the years. So what is Chapter 93A? It is the Consumer Protection Act. Now, what does that mean? So there are laws to protect the consumer. And the first violation of the Consumer Protection Act is unfair and deceptive business practices. Now, if we look at Pfizer, and I have Pfizer's data inside, and I think I showed it to you in other videos. If we take Pfizer's data, we have enough grounds to sue anybody who took the Pfizer vaccine or Moderna vaccine or Johnson & Johnson vaccine or Ozempic or basically any vaccine, because the data shows the damage. Vitamin K for children, which has been linked to cancer in recent studies. And you can always tell whether a study is useful if you can trace the money back to who paid for the study. And the vast majority of studies can be traced back to pharmaceutical companies, NGOs who were connected to pharmaceutical companies, or if we really want to trace the money far back, as I've told you before, it all goes back to BlackRock unless otherwise stated. So, the Consumer Protection Act is unfair and deceptive business practices. So, do you think that there's enough evidence out there that we could prove unfair and deceptive business practices? Now, there's a second count that's called a violation of the good faith and fair dealing inherent in every contract. I'll go through that slowly. Good faith and fair dealing. So every time there's a contract, and believe it or not, when you and I go to a convenience store and buy a stick of gum, that is technically, by law, a contract. There is a good faith and fair dealing, an understanding that both parties are acting in good faith and fair dealing. Now, do you think it's hard to prove that Pfizer did not act in good faith when their data showed the damage that their products would do before they even released them on the market? And once they released them on the market and that first year's data came out, again, it proved even more beyond a shadow of a doubt that they were harming people. So, again, the good faith and fair dealing part of the issue is not very hard to prove in a court of law. So then we have intentional infliction of emotional distress and negligent infliction of emotional distress. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, as soon as they release a product that they know the data states that it's going to harm people, well, they have now inflicted emotional distress on the victims. Negligent infliction of emotional distress means you got to prove that they should have been paying attention because the data stated that there was going to be some damage to people, and those who are harmed and victims now have a case in a court of law. It's slightly harder to prove, but if you can prove one, the courts usually rule in favor of the other. Now, there are other counts that we could put into this, but again, I'm not an attorney, and this is not legal advice. Now, the hardest issue, because I have filed, I think, 19 cases of my own, and I helped a gentleman by the name of Donald, a former Harvard attorney who recently passed this January. I helped him with about 75 cases. So I have been studying for the most, probably a couple hours a day for the better part of August of 23 to August of 24, and many hours after that. And I educated myself pretty quickly And I do intend to go to law school, even though I am not young, because it really takes only one attorney with courage, and Mr. Brown was one of those attorneys. So back in 1989, there was, when he graduated from Harvard Law School, despite not graduating from high school, one of the very few people who have done that. And he thought to himself, where are his services needed? And so there's an area in Greater Boston called Dorchester. And Dorchester is a very blue-collar area. Big chunk of Dorchester's residents have not gone to college, do not have a higher education, do not read every day. And a lot are people of color, Hispanic, African American, Black, whatever terms you'd like to use that don't offend your sensibilities, fragile sensibilities. So he opened his office right across the street from the Dorchester courthouse. And when you file a case, you have district court, which is cases up to $25,000, superior court, which is cases larger than that, and then federal district court, which can be any amount. And so one of his very first cases, a 82-year-old Black or African American gentleman walked in with two big shopping bags full of paperwork, receipts, bank statements, mortgage statements, and the like, and sat down with Mr. Brown and promptly said, I want to declare bankruptcy. And Mr. Brown says to him, well, let's see if bankruptcy is what is in your best interest. I'll read every document, and then you come back to me about 11 a.m. tomorrow. We'll sit down and we'll talk about what your options are, what's probably best for you. Mr. Brown did not sleep a wink, and he went through every single one of those documents. And when Mr. Storm came back the next day, Mr. Brown said, you don't want to declare bankruptcy, you want to sue the banks. Mr. Storm says, first off, I don't know how to do that. Secondly, I don't have any money for that. Mr. Brown says, don't worry about it. So Mr. Brown did the research, and he filed against 12 different banks that he had discovered that were basically setting uneducated people up to buy homes in Dorchester and to take their homes via foreclosure, and that those banks were, and loan applications, were lying on loan applications and making shit up. So Mr. Brown was determined, after the doctors told him that he would never walk again when he was in his mid-30s, to walk across the country. So he would walk 20 miles per day, and he would leave his law office and go 10 miles in one direction and hand out business cards across the street, and come back 10 miles back to the office and pass out business cards. So word got out, and he put together almost 3,000 individual lawsuits against these 12 banks. And these people didn't have the money, so as Mr. Brown had other cases that were generating money, as he could, he would send new cases across the street every day. If he could afford 2 cases, he would send 2 cases across the street to file lawsuits against these 12 banks. If he could afford 10, he would send 10 cases, and he paid for them himself. So the cost in Superior Court, I don't know what it was at that time, but it's probably about $350 to $400 to file a lawsuit and to pay the sheriff to serve the lawsuit. So just think about it. $400, 3,000 times, 4 times 3,000 is 120,000. 400, it's a lot of money. So basically he spent every dime that he could to file these lawsuits. Now, the problem was, even though those banks had the most expensive attorneys and had big teams of attorneys, Mr. Brown was a little bit of a dick, and he just wasn't afraid. He was a ball player, both baseball and football, and he was physically injured because he really didn't care about hurting his body, so he sure as heck wasn't afraid of other attorneys. And eventually, he had to pass this case along, and this case ended up being the largest individual payout at the time to these people to help them restart their lives. And one of the 12 banks actually had to declare bankruptcy and was absorbed by the other bank so it could pay its debts. And so the lesson here is that with 3,000 individual lawsuits, one guy one attorney with integrity bankrupted a bank. So what do you think will happen if you and I get together and we put together 300,000 lawsuits against Pfizer, against Moderna, and against Johnson & Johnson? What about when we get up to 3 million individual lawsuits? What about when we get up to 30 million individual lawsuits? They can't handle this. So odds are they're going to bury this video and bury me, but that's okay. The moment I'm outside this body, I can do a lot more than I can in this physical realm. So that's it for today. If you're still with me, I want you to know I appreciate you, and you're always welcome back. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. God bless.